Well, I'd love to welcome everybody here. And this is second year in a row we've done this? Preston lately has been producing editorial behind shows, so it has a theme. And this is the second year of a theme, but this all developed from his museum shows that are still traveling the United States. I'll let him talk more about that. But me and Preston have celebrated 25 years together. And between me and him, especially over 25 years of bringing demonstrations and lectures and catalogs, I think we produced about 21 catalogs in that period of time. When I first started working with him, there was really 3 native artists working in glass in the Southwest. Marvin Oliver would come down, and then Tony Hohola from, he was working out of Taos, and then Preston came down. But over the 25 years of bringing demonstrations and all the lectures and the catalogs, I don't think we realized we're creating a movement in contemporary native glass. And where there was 3, now there's 50 plus. And you'll be seeing more and more of that in the future, but it's really been wonderful to be part of this movement. And Preston's been one of the greatest ambassadors for glass amongst the native community, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
So take it away.
All right, so yes, because it was a 25-year anniversary, I decided to do something a little different. I will talk about some of the work towards the end, but there's a lot of stuff that I do that either you can't see in the gallery, so I included some public art stuff, some special projects I worked on. And so I just took the opportunity for this 25th year to kind of talk about more stuff than just the work. But so here we go. I got a lot of images. I'm going to go really fast, but it's going to be probably accused of oversharing, but I just thought I would just see how this works this time. I am Tlingit tribal member. I grew up in Seattle. My great-grandmother here, she moved to Seattle in the 20s. This was really one of the only pictures that I have of her, that she was on the front page of the Seattle Times in 1980 on her 100th birthday, and I was a paper delivery kid throwing papers on the porch, and then I get home and my mother says, "Well, did you see your great-grandmother on the front page of the Seattle Times?" Like, no, I was just delivering the paper. I don't read the paper. But anyways, so there she was. I had to dig it out of the archives in the paper. So this is a photo of her from probably in the early 1900s, I guess. So she, or just before, and she was in this. So she's the one sitting in the center. She was in a prearranged marriage, and she had 4 children, and one of them was my great-grandmother. And she was widowed, and she met this man, Dionisio Gubitayo, who was a Filipino man who had moved to Alaska, and they married and moved to Seattle and then had more kids. And so all of my great aunties and uncles have all passed on at this point. But she grew up in Sitka, Alaska, so this is a modern picture of Sitka, Alaska. It's a pretty amazing little town. And we're from the Killer Whale clan. That's our family crest, and we're from the Eagle moiety. So the Tlingit tribe is split into 2 halves, the eagle and the raven. And under each eagle or raven, and then you have different clan symbols that represent the families. And this is my family today. My wife, Osa, who is here with me. Recently retired, and now she can be my sidekick and travel with me. And it's funny because after 25 years, a lot of people are meeting her for the first time. I said, yeah, I have been married for 30 years. She's not an imaginary friend. She's my wife, and here she is. So And so just a little bit about my family, because, if my father was a great outdoorsman. He was a fly tyer, and he was very famous for that in the Northwest, and he worked for Boeing most of his life, but he dabbled in lots of different things, and, he would carve soapstone, he would paint, he would write poetry. He was a very well-read man, even though he didn't travel very far and wide out of the Northwest, but he was as famous for fly fishing as I am for glass blowing. So, and so here's, when the kids were little, and we used to go on float trips where, we would float down the Stillaguamish River in Washington. And he was a mountain climber. He was a marathon runner. He was like Superman in my eyes. He was just an amazing guy. He passed away a couple of years ago, 4 years ago. Or 5 years ago. And this is my mother. And so both of them, she's also, my grandfather was also Filipino, so my grandmother married a Filipino man, so technically I'm a Tlingit. And so my mother, she was, and my father, they sang folk songs and led Delta blues, and so I grew up with that, in my family. My mother's amazing at all handicrafts, from macrame to crochet and knitting and what have you. So I got a lot of, I was exposed to a lot of stuff when I was a kid, and so I guess I kind of felt like I could do anything I set my mind to. So, and this is Osa again. This is, we met, okay. This is Paul Marioni. So this is the first glass artist I ever met. And it was through it was his son, Dante Marioni, here. We were friends in high school. When Dante started blowing glass, he got me a job at this factory. And so I worked in the factory, the Glass Eye Studios in Seattle, from 1982 to about 1985, learning, making pretty simple things, Christmas balls, paperweights, and vases and things. But Dante and I had a special focus. That he was convinced that I too could find happiness as a glass blower, and he was right, because we would work together, and we were all the while I was trying to make it as a musician, and so that's what kind of like I was vacillating between playing music in the evenings and playing original music with these guys. This is a group called Ironing Pants Definitely. The guy on the right, he's the one that came up with that name, but we went with it. And so in 1984, I went to the Pilchuck Glass School. I met two glass artists at the Pilchuck Glass School. It's an international glass school. This is 1984. This is Larry Avicana. And this is Tony Hohola, who's Isleta Pueblo. And so he, that was a very auspicious thing in the end, because, as Leroy was mentioning, there were very few native glass blowers at that time. Tony was one of them, and he would come up to Seattle, and we would work. I would help him make his work for market. So he told me about this Indian market thing, and I was like, well, that sounds really cool. I don't know anything about that, but I was busy working in Seattle, and I didn't get down to New Mexico till about 1999, actually. But so Dante and I were, working at the Pilchuck Glass School, and being teaching assistants, and now we're moved on to instructors, what have you. But this is the main team that I worked with, and this is Benjamin Moore. So after the Glass Eye sort of time, I worked on this team, which was a very specialized team, and Benjamin Moore was the artistic director of the Pilchuck Glass School, and so he was kind of like my other father. He was, he was a very much of a father figure to me, and he encouraged me, even though I was, practicing and going out and hear bands, and I would stay out really late, and I'd show up late to work, on the team. but he really did, nurture me and support me and employ me. And with that, I basically learned through practical experience how to work with glass. Richard Royal is another. Ben and Rich were. They were kind of a team as well, like Dante and I. And so Richard is another. I really credit him as a teacher to me. This is Joe Benvenuto. He was really instrumental in helping. He offered to help me work and make my work and grind the glass, and with his help, he really helped push my work into the next level, and it's really, deserves a lot of credit. And unfortunately, he passed away about 8 years ago, and so we lost him to brain cancer, but he's still a very important figure to me. And of course, there's this guy, Dale Chihuly, who I worked with indirectly on occasion, and oftentimes it would be with this guy, Lino Talipietra, an Italian master who came to the States and started to proliferate education around glass making in a very high level. The American glass art movement is roughly almost 60 years old, and people were just kind of making it up as they went along. Lino came and he changed that whole dynamic. We learned so much through working with him. And, so this was last year. I got to go visit him on Murano. He's 91 years old just the other day, 2 days before I turned 62. And then, so we went on, I got to work with Lino, and we traveled to Sweden in 2003. And this photo was snapped the day after I met Åsa. 1993. Oh, yeah. That's right, 1993, not 2003. I threw this together in a hurry, I guess. Okay, so this is 1993, so you can see I was kind of, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed every time I get to sit next to her. So anyway, it was the best work trip I ever had. Came home with first a girlfriend, and then, became my wife. And so that's not 2004, that's 1994. So I went to live in Sweden for 6 months, and because I was convinced she was going to be the one, so I tried it out. I thought maybe I'd have to become a Swedish guy or something and work in the factories, but we decided not to do that, we became engaged and then moved to Seattle. She also moved to Seattle after her school. She was in design school. And so Stockholm is kind of like my second home, if I had one. It's a beautiful city, and we have a flying dog. This is how, let's see what the next image is here. Okay, I didn't go to art school. I fell into glass blowing and started doing the work that I do, just basically learning how to make the glass and control the material. And so this is kind of like, but I've always had a pet interest in psychology and the Joseph Campbell. This is his metric for the heroic monomyth. And also I did study Aikido for a few years, and I got a lot out of that. So I wasn't raised with any religious instruction, but when I discovered my native, well, not discovered them, but got into my native culture, it's really what led me to my ultimate success. But this was the kind of stuff that I was doing back then, very much about sort of Italian and Scandinavian design, functional decorative objects that were kind of like, in my opinion, they were decorative arts of the 30s and 40s, sort of the modernist era. And then this was what Osa, I helped her when I lived in Sweden. We produced this, I helped her produce this work for her graduate show. And then when she moved to Seattle, she kind of thought that she would carry on that path for making glass, and she got a job at Nordstrom, which she just retired from, as I mentioned, after 30 years. And so these were the things that we were making that she would design, and I would help her make her work. And as a nice footnote, we were recently approached by the National Nordic Museum in Seattle to do an exhibition together. So we're going to be working on that for a year, and it'll open up in October of next year. So this is her works. And then, of course, I've talked a little bit about Pilchuck, but it is a place where I essentially found myself as an artist. I went, obviously first as a student and then a teaching assistant working for the school. But in 2001, we had this opportunity, and this is another friend of mine who I met in 1988 up at the Pilchuck School, and he mentioned to me that, and I was just starting to do these drawings of the native design work, and he asked about my interest in it, and I said, well, it's part of my family background, and so he showed me his portfolio, and it was full of rattles and totems and masks and everything and prints, and he'd spent several summers up in Alaska working at Alaskan Indian Arts, and then another mentor. So I'm showing you all these people that are very important figures in my life. She was also from Alaska and was, taught me a lot about the culture because I didn't grow up there. And both David, so David had the idea at one point to make a totem pole for the founders of the Pilchuck Glass School. And since I was sort of coming up and in my career, and I pitched the idea of that to the school, and so we made a totem pole that was inlaid with glass, and for many reasons, because John Halberg was the heir to Weyerhaeuser, and he also donated the land to which Pilchuck is situated, but he was also a passionate Northwest Coast art collector, and he repatriated this dagger to a family in Angoon, and as a result was given a Tlingit name. And so together, we all came together on the campus, and so this was like, for me, it was almost like a rite of passage, just an amazing project to have the Tlingit carvers coming down and working on this project right there next to the glass studio. And so David and I were teaching a class, and then we had elders come down from Haines, Alaska, and help with the installation process, and it still stands on the campus today. And we had a class that was surrounding it, and for me, it was just like all the planets were aligned, and this is really, what kind of kicked my career into the next level. And Joe David is one of my most important mentors. I met, Joe was an artist in residence at the Pilchuck School in 2000, and we worked together making work, and he insisted on building a sweat lodge up on the campus, and so we did this sweat ceremonies up on the campus in 2000, and over 4 days' time, we did 4 sweats, and at the final day, we did a night sweat, came out in the morning, and then he shared his name with me, which on the Northwest Coast is a significant thing because you might receive a hereditary name as your life changes and as you grow as an individual. So because I'd never really spent time going to church or anything, this was something that really opened up my eyes to Native spirituality, and it's quite an amazing adventure. So this was the 25 years with Blue Rain. Okay, so this was the first postcard that was made as an announcement for the show. So that, and then there's Gabe. So anyway, a lot of just amazing experiences and good friends that I've made through coming to Santa Fe, and just feeling this connection. Well, making the connection to the native collectors. At first, glass was a little bit of a hard sell because it's not a traditional medium. But so I just feel that the longer that we work with glass, the more it will become a traditional medium. And this was Marvin Oliver, another important teacher for me who passed away. He used to come down to the market every year as well, till he passed away a few years ago. So, yeah, lots of friends here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and very, very a big part of how I learned how to interpret my own culture for today's market. So that was working with all these people and befriending them was a real important step for me. So this is some of the public art. So this is, you can see, unless you go to these places, you're not going to really see them in person. This is David Franklin, who I work on all this public art work with. And we create, this is a printing on glass that's sandwiched and laminated in between window glass, and so we can make large compositions with this method here. We did this for the Linwood Sound Transit Station. And this was commissioned basically for the Burke Museum. Moving on, we have like the Microsoft campus. This was a new piece that went up about a year ago, called Raven's Escape. And there's a series of these that kind of go through this corridor where you, kind of a breezeway where the Microsoft employees are walking through and working in all these buildings. And this one was outside of the Climate Pledge Arena, which is where our local hockey team plays the Kraken. So we had this opportunity to do all these public art pieces. This was a significant one for me because this is in Juneau, Alaska, where it is the cultural arts center called the Sea Alaska Heritage Institute, and so I'm on the board of that organization now. And this was in the interior of a sort of a welcoming center, and this is a place where a lot of presentations and things happen. That's in the interior of this building. It resembles the interior of a clan house. This one's up in Anchorage. This was another project. And then I got to work with Alyssa London. She was the Miss Alaska for the Miss USA pageant. And so she didn't win, but she was in the top 10 final, which was pretty exciting. So yeah, moving on. This was a project that just came together this year. It was about 3 years in the works, Sleeping Beauty. So they asked me to do the set designs for this production, and so I got to work with the set designers and the prop makers and what have you, and we used some elements of Northwest Coast design, and it was really an amazing experience. Got to meet the dancers, and everybody was so curious about, the work and what it meant and what it, but it was kind of surreal in a lot of ways, to see it all come together, all these elements of design in the production. This is kind of in the end where Puss in Boots comes in, and the first two acts are the story, and then at the end, that's like Little Red Riding Hood comes out, and so that's the wolf chasing Little Red Riding Hood. Anyway, So super fun. Paul Taswell, he was the one that really did all the costumes, but it was inspired by Northwest Coast Art, and he won Academy Award for the Wicked. It was pretty cool because he was working on it simultaneously while working on this production. So, a lot of the travels that I've done as well are quite a big part of how I, developed as an artist. Going to Japan, I think it was the first time I was there. I recognized that there was the Japanese artists had an Asian sensibility to their work, and it really kind of reinforced the idea that I was convinced that I could develop a native sensibility around the work, over time. And so that's kind of how it's come to be for me. So this is Osamu Noda. He's the director, or who built this glass facility in Japan. So I've been there several times working with Japanese students, and it's always just such an amazing place to visit and so inspiring. For a few years, I was going to Indigenous artist gatherings, working with Hawaiian people, working with Maori. This was a trip that we did to Boulogne-sur-Mer in France, and there was an old castle that had it was a museum, but had this old material from Kodiak Island, and so we put some. So Perry Eaton was the guy that put this together, and we donated a bunch of work and gave it to the museum, and it was the first, maybe the only contemporary native art show at that time at least in France, maybe in Europe. But to go and see this stuff at the Louvre was pretty remarkable. So also spent many trips down to New Zealand to work with the Maori people. Came home with some Maori art on my arm. There's a crew down there, really good friends that we all have a very common thread, and through Joe David here, again, is a constant in my life. So this sort of comes to the point of talking a little bit about the collaborations that I've been doing, working with different cultural or different Native people or Indigenous people from around the world. So Australia, got to do a cultural art exchange in Australia, and not only are there glass artists down there, but also meeting up with some of the Australian Aboriginal people, and just really very a remote part of the country in the Northern Territory. This is Jambua Marwili, really amazing cultural leader and artist in that region. And so the collaborations, again, a lot of the artists that are here in the Southwest, Jody Naranjo, of course, we've done several different shows. And then with Joe David, working with Joe always pushes me into much deeper explorations of form and the meaning behind them. Of course, this is Dante, who also shows here in the gallery, but Leroy suggested that we do a collaboration, and it was kind of like an aha moment, because we had never really, although we had worked together and I'd helped him with his work, we never really did anything that we put our, signed together. So this was a combination of Dante's skills and my sensibilities as well. And then Harlan Rayano. These things are really a kick in the pants trying to execute them with my technique, but they were super fun in any case, and challenging. And of course, Tammy was the first one that I collaborated with, making these classical forms. And for me, it was like kind of getting back to my roots when I was working with a lot of the folks in my studio originally. And then Lewis Gardner. So this green is jade stone. And these pieces, to me, are really incredible pieces. And then, of course, there's Buffalo Man. Working with this Southwest, the mound builder culture, which is Choctaw, where he comes from. And again, as you know, when I'm doing these collaborations, I'm working with other artists, and I'm learning about how they interpret, their culture. And then, of course, in this case with Raven, then I called him a Brazinglet because he's Brazilian and Tlingit, so I don't know if that makes any sense, but but these are amazing canvases to work on, super fun. This is a new project that is forthcoming that Spike Mafford is a childhood friend of mine who is a photographer, and so we're going to make these monumental images like 10 feet tall by 5 foot wide. And then there's the Czech connection, and this is the most recent thing I'm coming off of. I've been traveling to the Czech Republic for the past 10 years, and I started working with this guy, Martin Janicki, who is an amazing and talented sculptor. And so for the past 2 years, we've been collaborating on things. He has this insane ability to just sculpt the face out of these out of a bubble. Like it's like Chase and Reposé type, work, but you're working with a hot torch and the glass is hot. And so this was back in June that we convened up on Lopez Island in Raven, Sky River, and Kelly Odell's studio. And of course, Joe David knew the place well and had spent a lot of time there. So he came together and brought us all together, had some ceremonies. We kind of worked on next level stuff that will be forthcoming. These are just combining everybody's talents, Raven and Kelly and of course Martin and me and Joe. So we're kind of thinking of this. We want it to be like a collective where we're going to make some new and kind of mind-blowing stuff. I say that in my own opinion. I think it's pretty mind-blowing. So we just got off a teaching session where we were working at the Pilchuck Glass School. And so this is based on a story called Snot Boy, where it was Entuck. And it was a name that was given to Martin here, who's sitting there with the torch. And so we're all connected through Joe David, and we all have this really special connection with each other as colleagues and friends and everything, and making some pretty wild stuff here. This piece probably took about 10 hours to make, all these little elements brought together on this little moon face. A couple of ravens and blackberry brambles and what have you. So we're looking forward to the next chapter of working together, and to be continued. Everybody still awake? Okay. So yeah, just again touching on the music again, because this is so much. It's like my brain is really, works in, is split in two. I'm making music, recording with a 10-piece group. Met this guy when I turned 50, 12 years ago, and he came and played my birthday party. I paid into a Kickstarter, but we became friends after that, and he agreed to go work with me in the studio, because I had a group back then called Little Big Band, and it was working with native singers and performers, performance artists, and what have you. And so, as you can see, Clarissa here, who I was showed a picture of earlier, she was in the group as well. So we were taking Klan songs and reinterpreting them. And this is my high school jazz teacher. So, I mean, this whole thing, I had him come in and he played trumpet on a couple songs. So we make vinyl records. We have been, I like to show the artwork on the album covers too, because it's a lot of fun to, it's like an extension of my, artistic expression. But the music itself is based on Native culture, using Indigenous languages and jazz musicians, and it's like extended improvisations and quite a three-ring circus when we're all, coming together. And so these are all the albums that we put together so far. This one just got mailed to me about a week ago. So this is our sixth album, and this will be the seventh. But this is going to be this is a soundtrack to a documentary film that's being made about the group called "The Magic of Noise," and it talks about the origins and the evolution of the group. Of course, we lost a couple members during that time. And so there's quite a story about it and the music itself. But it's so fun to have such a large group of people coming together. It's a real force of nature. A lot of fun. Museum shows. Okay. So this was the first museum show I had from 2008. The Museum of Glass. I called this a mid-career survey. Everybody was calling it a retrospective, but mid-career survey sounded better because I'm not that old. Anyway, this was an amazing show that traveled the country for about 5 years. And during that time, they gave me an honorary doctorate degree from University of Puget Sound. So that was kind of like the second accolade after receiving my name from Joe David. Then I got sort of validated by, the western side of the world. And Walter Porter was a man that I worked with during that time. We put lectures together, and I call him the Tlingit Joseph Campbell, because what he did is he took the Tlingit stories and he broke them down into a series of metaphors and symbols, and he unlocked basically it was the Raven in the Box of Daylight. And this was an exhibition that's currently touring and has been at the Smithsonian and is currently at Spokane, in Spokane, Washington. Then it's going to move to Davenport, Iowa. And wrap up its run in August of next year. But this basically, goes through the story of how Raven brought the daylight to the world. And so this was a deep dive for me about trying to put the viewer in the thread of the story. And so Raven basically, it's the beginning of time. Raven is a white bird. He goes to the fisherman of the night. He asks, "Where's the daylight?" He's told about this old man who has the daylight in his clan house. So he devises a plan to, first he goes to visit the old man, and the old man shoos him away. He doesn't want anything to do with him because he knows Ravens is sort of a trickster, or he's... Anyway, not to be trusted. So he turns himself into a speck of dirt. Raven has the power of transformation. So he transforms into this speck of dirt and floats down the river. The daughter, who goes to gather water in the morning, she scoops it up. Her attendants discover the dirt. They toss it out. She has to reformulate his plan, turns himself into a hemlock needle, and then the same thing. He floats down the river. She scoops it up, and she swallows this hemlock needle, and now Raven's inside of her. And so she becomes pregnant. And so she, of course, she has no husband, but nobody questions that. So she becomes pregnant and gives birth to Raven in the form of a human child. So he transforms inside of her stomach. All the while, so he's a beloved family member, and he's going one by one. He takes the stars and he tosses them into the sky. He gets in trouble, gets reprimanded. Finds the next box. It's the one that contains the moon. So what does he do? He's kind of walking around with it, playing with it. And then when nobody's looking, he opens up the box, and it's the moon. And he tosses it through the smoke hole in the center of the clan house. He's lost and gone forever. So this time he's really in trouble. And, when it comes to the third box, the old man says, "No way, not that one. You can't have that one." And so he fusses and cries and screams and refuses to eat, and he becomes really weak, and he's laying in bed. And the daughter, goes to the father and says, "Is there anything more important than your grandson?" And he says, "Yeah, of course you're right." So he takes the box, and Raven at this point he's tired of being in human form, so he transforms back into a bird, and the old man immediately realizes he's been fooled. And so he grabs this white raven by his tail, and he holds it over the fire pit in the center of the clan house. He instructs the men to throw pitch onto the fire, and this black smoke turns Raven into a black bird, and that's how he becomes black. But he manages to get away, and he breaks daylight on the world, and then people who've been living in darkness their whole lives scatter into different parts of the world. They run off into the forest, or they jump into the water, they jump into the sky, and they become the animals and the mammals of that region. And so, and over time, those animal symbols were adopted to use for crest symbols. And so that kind of brings me to the last part of what I was going to do. I'm doing pretty good so far. Time-wise, I mean. So this is, I started to think about, having gotten into the Raven story and the metaphors behind the Raven story, and learning, we all have a metaphor, when we say, the world is in darkness and Raven brings the light. Walter used to like to use a lot of theology. So, whereas he would say, Jesus is the light, and but it also has the metaphor of enlightenment, or turning, shedding light on things, on the darkness. And so, the metaphor of the boxes are, metaphors of knowledge that are contained within the boxes. Of course, the Immaculate Conception, because the daughter is pregnant, she doesn't have a husband, and then it goes on and on to, many aspects of that story have. You can break it down into what do the stars represent to us as humans? I mean, people look at the stars with wonder, they navigate by the stars, so there's all this metaphor that is embedded within this story. And once I got into that, and done with the Raven and the Box of Daylight exhibition, I started to wonder, well, what's Raven doing now? What is he, did he just disappear? Or, why are there no more stories about Raven that are coming out? So I started to work with Garth Stein, who's an acclaimed novelist, and he is also part Tlingit. So we started to kick this idea around of, Raven, he's got to be out there still. So if he were around us, what would he be doing? He would, so in this series of stories, and the catalog that you have, some of you have, the gallery produced, is the third installment of this sort of saga of what Raven is doing. So, but in the first one, Raven, say he fell asleep. And he fell asleep for 100 years. It just so happens that Sleeping Beauty, too, the Sleeping Beauty, she fell asleep for 100 years. But so did Raven in my story, or our story, me and Garth. And so he wakes up, and he doesn't recognize the world around him. All the trees are gone, and all these tall buildings are in their place. He doesn't understand it. So he's trying to make sense of what the world around him. And so he he wakes up, he's molted a new set of feathers. His black feathers are no longer black, they're white. So he wakes up and he's kind of perplexed, and he looks at himself in the water, reflection of the water, and he doesn't like what he sees. He doesn't, everybody's pointing at him like, oh, look, there's the white raven over there. Everyone's gawking at him. So he decides to turn himself black again. So he rolls into the ashes of an old bonfire, and he darkens his feathers so he can travel the world sort of incognito. No one's going to be, pointing and laughing at him anymore. The first group that he goes to visit are the Land Otter people. So the Land Otter people in Tlingit culture, if you die from drowning, or if you are lost in the woods from, you may be suffering from hypothermia, that the Land Otters they would come and they would steal your soul, transform you into a Land Otter. So in our version of the story, Raven goes to commune with the Land Otters, and he goes, hey, things are all messed up. I don't, recognize where I'm at. And the Land Otters are like, yeah, there's, the white man says there's a heat wave in the ocean, and all the snow crabs are dying. And he's like, God, well, yeah, I'm going to have to go do something about this. So he's like traveling around, and he's communing with these different animals, as he did in these old stories. There's lots of stories of Raven. So we started to use aspects of his behavior and some of the actions within the old stories to make it sort of a new version. So he comes back to this beach, and sees the people. The Raven, you've come back to us. And he goes, yeah, we found this box up around the corner, up by the beach, and he says, well, let's go take a look, So he's walking with the people, and he goes, well, last time I found the sun in a box. He's like, yes, Raven, you're wonderful. This is great, and the stars and the moon. He goes, yes. Okay, so they walk up around the bend, and they see this box. And so Raven's like, okay, we're gonna see what's inside. We're gonna get the magic that's in this box. And so this is actually a story that there was a cargo container. This was under COVID, that a cargo container fell into the water, and all these Yeti coolers were, washing up on the coast of Alaska. And the Yeti said, oh, we know we lost some of these coolers, and yeah, if you happen to find one, feel free to keep it, but post it on Instagram so we can, was it a marketing ploy? I don't know. But anyway, so Raven he's encountering this cooler, and it says Yeti on it. So he goes, well, it must be some sort of spirit. I'm going to go and jump in there, and I'm going to do battle with this Yeti, spirit, and I'm going to steal his tongue, and I'm going to steal his power. And so he goes, I'll jump in. You guys close the lid. So he jumps in. They close the lid, and they're just sitting there looking at the box, and nothing's happening. And all of a sudden, the tide comes in, washes the box out to sea, and then so he's having this metaphysical battle with this Yeti spirit. And so he wakes up. He's in the middle of the ocean. So he finds this hole and drops down into the ocean. And so that came from a vignette or a little detail within a story. So I decided to just try to figure out how to illustrate these actions, with these sculptures. So Raven goes through a hole in the ocean, and he goes to commune with the killer whales, and the killer whales are all bent out of shape because man's polluted the environment so badly. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is like, it's desecrating their habitat. And so, Raven goes to visit Petrel, who lives by this natural spring. And, sort of, Petrel has a, well, that's a whole other story. I'll skip that one. I could go on and on. But so, so in my version of the story, I'm trying to say that Raven is, battling climate change. He's trying to protect the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I think that that's what, where stories may have originated from, like things that happen in nature, and then it gives a form, in a story. So the blue light spirits, again, sort of playing with my fascination with modernism and, Calder, obviously, making these things. And this is based on a sweat lodge experience, actually. There's sort of the blue lights that, come into the lodge itself. And, so this is a shaman's mask, and the shaman's, in some of these stories, he's kind of, forcing Raven to have these visions and understand the world on a different level. Raven, he's driven by hunger. He's always eating and commanding people to feed him, and so this was just concurrent through all of the Raven stories. So the most current one, that I'm not going to go read the whole story like I did last time, but it, so in this version, the world's gone bananas, right? So, we have a little, maybe some of us can relate to that, what's going on in the world today. But, so he, Raven is of two minds. He's always having this inner dialogue with himself, and so so I wanted to illustrate that that sort of dialogue happening, and then so he goes to the beach, and I think this is out of order. He goes to the beach, and he sees that the tide is really far out, and so he sees all these mussels and clams and cockles, and he's throwing them down. He's eating them up as fast as he can find them, and then the tide rushes in, and without any warning, it just all of a sudden it comes and washes him, tumbles him over, and so he's trying to figure out what's going on, and in one of the old stories, there's an old woman who's the keeper of the tides. And she's the one that lets the tides in and out, but she's forced to do this by a raven. So Raven says, what's going on here? I was just gathering food, and and I'm hungry. It's like, well, I don't get it. The tides I can't seem to control them. We go, well, that's your job. So he takes, a sea urchin, and he pokes her in the behind and says, now, do what I tell you. You let the tides in, you let the tides out. Twice a day. So. And so he leaves her there, but she's still having a hard time dealing with, the tides. And so this is another story where I learned that there's stories where Raven can lift the edge of the ocean or the edge of a lake and slip down into the world beneath. And so in this version, he's gone down to the killer whale town. And so, like in the old stories, the killer whales live like we do in longhouses, so I made this village under the sea with the killer whales that are sort of swimming around. And so he goes down there, and they're having this kind of revival in this tent, and everyone's, killer whales are all going crazy, and they said, yeah, well, we're really, really pissed off about this garbage patch, and we've decided. Oh, well, that was the first thing is that another news story is that the killer whales are wearing dead salmon on their head, and they're swimming for miles and miles and days with dead salmon on their heads, and so there you go. Now we have it represented in a glass sculpture. So Raven's questioning. I was like, "What's going on? What's up with the? Well, these are our bonnets. These are our Sunday bonnets." And he goes, "You guys are crazy. There's a dead fish on your head." And it's like, "Well, you can join us on our Sunday parade if you want, or you can just leave us alone because it's none of your business. He goes over to the tent where the killer whales are decided that they're going to attack boats, which is another thing that the killer whales are doing these days. So, well, why are you doing this? And he said, well, we're protesting because they're polluting our environment. And he says, okay, so you're going to sink their boats and then you're going to eat them? And he goes, no, we can't eat them because they call us killer whales, but I don't know why they call us killer whales. We're like more pacifist whales, We don't, killer whales were known to not, harm human beings. In fact, the original story of the creator of killer whales, he did create it to take revenge on his brothers-in-law who left him stranded on this rock out in the middle of the ocean because they were jealous of his ability as a hunter. Tlingit was his name. And so he carved this, killer whale out of a piece of wood, and then he breathed life into it, and he told it, go kill those, sink that canoe over there and kill these people that are in it. But after he did that, the Tlingit, he instructed killer whales should never harm human beings again. And fact is that they are known to be friendly to humans. And in the old days, they would chase seals towards the canoes, and then they'd veer off, and then the hunters would get the canoes, or the hunters would get the seals. So, but the killer whales, they said, well, we found a workaround. We've got sharks. Sharks are more than willing to do our, bidding. So we're just going to discombobulate these boats, and these sailors are going to be floating and bobbing in the water, and then then the sharks are going to come in, and they're going to do the job, and they're more than willing to do that. So they're busy sharpening their teeth on a stone in the bottom of the ocean. So that's what's going on here. That's why I call it that piece, shark tooth. And then, so later, Raven is going through all of this, all of these, meeting up with all these different characters, and so he goes to this mountain goat who tells him about this frog king who lives under this mountain, who you should never go up this part of the water because if you disturb the frog king, he's going to cause an earthquake, and tsunamis will ensue and what have you. So Raven can't quite understand this, but they have a lot of dialogue, and it's all in the story, or all in the catalog. And then as he's talking with this mountain goat, he looks like, well, who is that? He goes, I am Thunderbird. And since we couldn't find any really good stories about Thunderbird, although it is a clan, there's not a lot of stories about Thunderbird, so I wanted to include a Thunderbird, so we just said, so Thunderbird simply goes around saying, I am Thunderbird, and I flap my wings, and there's thunder, claps through the world, but Raven decides that he goes, well, come on, it's like, I don't hear that, thunder all that often, maybe 5 or 6 times a year. So what else do you do? He goes, well, I'm Thunderbird, and he goes, hey, look, I think we could do something here. You're going to run for office, and I'm going to be your advisor. So all you have to do is just tell people you're Thunderbird. So he's going around saying, I'm Thunderbird. He goes, well, what makes you think, I could be president? He goes, well, it's like, let's try this out. Mr. President, what do you think about the economy? I am Thunderbird. And he goes, yeah, great. Okay, let's run with this. I think you'll get 51% of the vote. And so Thunderbird, in our version of the story, is going to be the next president. Of course, there's genetically modified salmon today. So I've made this sort of DNA helix inside this salmon form. There's another vignette within the story where they've decided to take this genetically modified salmon, and they were going to make canned salmon out of it, and they're asking for Raven to endorse it. And he goes, well, let me taste the product before I put my name on it. And so, of course, he swoops in and takes a bite. He's like, oh, that's terrible, So anyway, this is our part of our story there. Oh, this is the part where actually when he goes up into the mountains and he has a communion with a mountain goat.